A Woman's Response to The Rational Male by Rollo Tomassi. We're finally here. Hypergamy. I have been wanting to talk about this for so long. Like, I've been looking forward to this chapter for weeks. I am I am so excited about this chapter. Um, Guys, there's something like really shiny over there, and I'm sorry, I'm gonna have to do this next week. So before I get too deep into this chapter, there's something I kind of want to talk about. It has very little actually to do with this chapter. It was a tendency I've seen in a lot of men on the internet, which is actually one of the reasons I did my original hypergamy video. It was because I kept seeing these guys with this idea about women that, that hypergamy is like the root of all evil, I guess. And I mean, just to give you an idea of the kinds of things I've seen guys saying on the internet, here's something that I just kind of picked up in a YouTube comments box. It was actually a video someone had done about Tomassi's war brides. It was actually an interesting video, and I actually like a lot of this guy's videos. I've watched several of them. But this was what I found in the comments section. And there are people who really believe this. There are people who really believe that because of hypergamy, women don't actually experience love. We're just after the stuff. We want you to give us your money. It's all just an exchange of goods and services here, really. And I don't think that's necessarily what Tomassi is saying. And I don't think that that's necessarily the kind of message that you can take away from Tomassi's book. I don't think that the dismal view of hypergamy that a lot of people have adopted is necessarily a very realistic view of hypergamy. And so one of the reasons I was very excited to talk about this book is I think people need to understand hypergamy a little bit better. It's not just you give me your money so that I can give you my sex and we'll call it love. This is one of those big nay Walt kinds of moments. Like, hey, by the way, we do actually experience love. Just so we're clear, you guys, we do actually feel that. Just saying. Anyway, moving on. So, right away, let's get started on war brides. And war brides, I guess, is kind of controversial. It's a little upsetting for some people, and I'm not entirely sure why, because it makes so much sense. I mean, this is how we are. And I mean, I could give you a personal example right here. I've been pregnant 5 times, and I have 3 kids. My very first pregnancy was a complete disaster. I ended up with big abdominal scars that I still have to this day because my first pregnancy just didn't work out so well. And everybody knew I was pregnant. And, when I came back to work and I wasn't pregnant anymore, everybody knew about that too. And the thing is, when you lose a baby and everybody knows about it, all of a sudden people start coming out of the woodwork, and they always come to you the same way. They wait until nobody's around, nobody's listening, and then it's like, I'm so sorry, I lost a baby too. And you would not believe how many women are walking around these days who've lost kids. Like when Tomassi talks about like prehistoric women, making a huge emotional investment in their offspring, because women make a huge emotional investment in their offspring, and then, running the risk of eventually losing those offspring, very suddenly through war, disease, famine, predatory animals. That hasn't really gone away. That's still something that we live with. That's part of our lives. And modern medicine has done amazing things to reduce many of those problems, but they still exist. Women still have, so many women have miscarriages. Like, you wouldn't believe it. Nobody ever talks about it, but go to a big public place and look around, and you will find yourself looking at least one woman who's had a miscarriage, because we're everywhere. and nobody talks about it. Because, I mean, how do you broach that topic? It's kind of awkward, you know? Hey, I had a miscarriage. Like, what do you say after that? Like, it's awkward, so nobody talks about it, but it's still common enough. And one of the gals who came and talked to me about her miscarriage, it was her first pregnancy that she'd lost to, and she and I handled it in completely different ways. As soon as I was physically recovered from the surgery, my husband and I talked about it, and we started trying again for another baby because the first one had failed, and we couldn't bring him back. We couldn't make him, we couldn't bring him back, but we could try again. And if we tried again, then we would know for certain whether or not I was actually fertile or if I was sterile. So, that was kind of an important thing to know. And I was very determined to find out as soon as possible because I didn't want that uncertainty hanging over my head. And the end result was a beautiful baby girl. So it was worth it. The pain, the loss, all of it, it goes away when you're actually holding a live, healthy child. But the other girl, she didn't handle it the way I handled it. She looked at it and it was so emotionally painful for her and just so overwhelming and so traumatizing that she refused to ever get pregnant again. She just didn't ever want to face it. She was like, I don't want to get pregnant because I don't even want to have to face the possibility of losing another baby. It was that bad for her. I have 3 kids. I don't know if she's ever tried to have another kid, even to this day. And women have that annoyingly small window of fertility with which to have offspring. It's enough of a window if you get married and you start having kids while you're still fertile. It's enough of a window to have, about as many kids as you can handle, and most women don't want necessarily that many kids. A human being can only raise so many, so really it's enough of a window if you're on the ball. But if things start going wrong and you start getting bogged down, it's not that big of a window after all. If you lose a baby, SIDS happens. It happens. It's horrible and it happens. And if you take, however many years before trying again, well, that's going to eat up some of your time. And you don't have all the time in the world. Say your husband dies, That wasn't something that happened in the old times, just specifically in the old times. That's something that happens these days. Unexpected cancer happens. Car accidents happen. Natural disasters occur. Terrible things happen in this world. Like, we don't talk about it. We have this beautiful rosy-eyed view of the world that things like that don't really happen, except that they do. They happen all the time. They just haven't happened to us yet. Be grateful. I'm grateful. I'm very grateful. But they still happen. And if you let yourself be bogged down by that, well, it's going to affect that window. That window is going to get smaller. The longer you're bogged down, the smaller that window becomes. The less time you have. And so the women who were the most fertile, the women who survived, yeah, they're women like me. Shut off the emotions. Just power through it. Make it work. We're like sharks. We have to keep moving to stay alive. And that's how I thought all of humanity was. Like, it's weird to me to think that other people don't see the world that way. Women's sexual pluralism was really interesting for me. I found that to be a very entertaining section to read because I was very much... I've been aware of that. And I think the thing that a lot of guys get kind of hung up on is the alpha fucks versus beta bucks idea, or even the alpha seed versus beta need. It's not quite that simple. And Tomassi does touch on that briefly, and I'll try to put the quote up here for you on that. It's that we want it all. We want to have it all. And I mean, I've been very, very fortunate in the fact that I finally did find the guy who had it all. And so, that's it for me. That was why I got married. I didn't get married at 23, but that was the reason that I stopped hunting at 23. That was when I just, shut down all search engines. It's like, okay, we're good. We got it. Now my mission is just to keep him. you know, I broke down ugly crying at our wedding because we'd said our vows and it wasn't entirely sealed. We hadn't signed the paperwork. We were going to sign the paperwork, and I just broke down ugly crying because I realized this was it. I have him. It's really happened. He's really married to me. We're stuck together now, legally. I was so thrilled because I mean it was very exciting to me. And I wasn't trying to be ugly crying either. Like people were like, "Are you okay?" And I'm like, "I'm just so happy." Because it was it. He had it all. He had everything I wanted. It was the alpha attraction. All of that wonderful, titillating stimulation, and also, I mean, I don't think I was necessarily looking for someone to provide for me, but he was going to be able to get me pregnant. He was going to be able to give me kids. He was going to be a good dad. He was a good lifelong partner. And that's what I was looking for. I wasn't looking for pay my bills, take care of me, put a roof over our heads. I was looking at the time, 23. At the time we were married, I guess I was 25, 25, 23, 24, 25. Yeah. At the time we got married, I guess I was 25-ish. I wasn't looking for provide for me and take care of me. I was looking for lifelong partner. And he had that too, full enchilada. The thing with the alpha fucks versus beta bucks is I think a lot of guys, they think women are only looking for thing number one at one point and only looking for thing number two at the other point. And the truth is we're always looking for both. And Tomassi touches on this beautifully. We always want to have it all. That's what we want. And that's what we're looking for. And so, like, I think a lot of guys, make the mistake of looking at my husband because he's married and because he wanted to marry me and wanted to have kids with me. They look at that and it's like, oh, that's a beta trait. And it's like, I wouldn't be too entirely sure of that. I think that, there are extreme ends of both poles. There's the extreme beta who knows he can only hope to catch maybe one woman and he just clings to her like glue. And then there's the extreme alpha end, which is the I can get away with fucking as many women as I want and hopefully impregnating lots of women and spreading my seed far and wide. There's those two extremes, but most guys are more toward the middle where they have a youthful phase where they're experimenting around and sowing their wild oats, but then they have a later, more committed phase where they find a partner and they settle down and they have offspring. And it's kind of a dual strategy that I think a lot of men to some greater or lesser degree adopt, where they have their wild times, but then they have a partner where they can stick around and make sure, like dead certain, that those kids at least survive. They might have some other kids floating around out there, and, that's not a modern way of thinking about it. Like, modern days we have condoms. Back then it was they might have some kids floating around out there. Pre-condoms, there was that possibility, and that, could occasionally yield up offspring and descendants, but usually if you want them to live, you stick around and you make sure that they're going to live, and, maybe have a mistress on the side if you can afford it. And then you stick around and make sure that those kids live as well. But I think one of the mistakes a lot of guys make when they're looking at the alpha fucks versus the beta bucks is, number one, we're always looking for all of it. When we're feeling a little more sexually receptive, when we're a little bit more fertile, that peak time of the month, all of a sudden it's like, well, I really, really, what am I thinking about? What am I looking at when I'm looking at this guy? Well, I'm looking at his muscles. I'm looking at how much he turns me on. And then at other times of the month, it's like, he's got nice muscles, but I'm kind of paying a little bit more attention to the fact that he's the guy who pays the bills, and oh, thank God, somebody's got my back when it comes to these financial situation things that are arising. Like it goes up and down, like we kind of like waves on an ocean. Like we have different places where we're looking at different things, but it's never just a straight up to one side, straight down to the other kind of thing. It's much more middling. I really liked this quote. Um, this is this is something that just resonated very strongly with me naturally because of my history. Um, I experienced this so much. I was a stripper. I was a wild girl. I was, not the kind of woman that men take seriously. Um, I was a slut. People are very happy to throw that word around. I was a whore. People have definitely been more than happy to throw that word around. That's how people saw me. And I've had people even commenting, not necessarily I can't remember where I got the comment, but basically you can't turn a hoe into a housewife. I've heard that one a lot. People give me that one. It's like, except that I'm a housewife, so apparently you can, or maybe I just wasn't a hoe to begin with. Um, Context is everything because now I've, flipped it 180 and I'm a sweet little housewife and I'm very wholesome and I'm baking cookies in the kitchen and, I've done the barefoot and pregnant thing 5 times and I really hope that I really want to do it at least one more time. I really do. I don't think it's going to happen at this rate, but I'm hoping. Um, I those two things seem so non-congruent, and the thing that a lot of people think very easily, a very easy assumption that people can jump to is, okay, you started out as the hoe, but somehow you had this revelation, and now you're the housewife. It's like, no, no, I'm still the same girl. I'm really glad Tomassi included this, and I think this is something that should be paid special attention. I think that dating advice changes depending on how old you are, and I think sometimes that is something people overlook. There's this tendency to look at dating advice as this one size fits all kind of thing, and really it shouldn't be seen that way. I don't think that dating advice is a one gender kind of thing. There's dating advice that works well for men and dating advice that works well for women. And I think it's not very common that you find dating advice that works well for both. No, it really doesn't. Okay, so now we're getting to the perhaps one of the most interesting ideas about hypergamy that I've seen and one that I've wanted to discuss quite a lot. And it's the idea that hypergamy is always functioning. Now, when I made my original hypergamy video, I talked about it. And I talked about how I looked and I looked and I looked. I was extremely hypergamous. I was extremely aware of my hypergamous nature. And then I found my husband, and suddenly it was like, okay, mission accomplished. We can shut down that program. Life is good. And this idea that the program is constantly running, well, that's interesting. And so I spent a lot of time thinking about that. Um, I've seen it described as women are constantly asking themselves, well, is this man the best I can do? Is this man the best I can do? What if I could do better? Is this really the best I could do? That's not been my experience personally. And I was interested in this. I was also interested in the number of NAWALT arguments that he's gotten when it comes to this idea. No, not all women are constantly asking themselves in the back of their mind, well, is this really the best I could do all the time? Like, women don't do that. And so I thought about it a lot. And I will describe to you guys my own personal experience of my own hypergamous nature to the best of my ability. Just to give you guys an idea of how women, maybe not all women, but how at least one woman has processed this, element of her nature. So before I met my husband, extremely hypergamous. I'd go on first dates with guys. By dessert, I knew I never wanted to talk to them again, so I'd go find another guy and go on a first date. I'd meet guys in the strip club and I'd sell them an hour-long dance, and I'd sit and I'd talk with them and talk with them and talk with them for, large portions of their dance. Didn't want to see them again either. Met thousands of men and passed up thousands of men. Just no, not that one, not that one. Go to another one. Next, next, next. I think at this point it's safe to say I'm pretty hypergamous, and I was aware of it. I knew that that had something to do with it. I thought that the idea of limiting it to measurable things like finances and level of collegiate attainment, it was too limiting. Hypergamy is everything. All the different things that make up a man, all the different elements inside of him, are those, when they've all been kind of summed up and tabulated, do they kind of sit a little higher than where I am right down here, or do they just not? Fast forward ahead, I meet my husband. I remember it was, I think, after our very first date. I think it was like the morning after our very first date, because our very first date ended up taking the entire night. That morning, I got up. I was standing in the kitchen of my apartment, and I was making coffee. I remember where I was standing. I remember I had the coffee pot in my hand, and he walked up to the kitchen door, and I turned and I looked at him. And I remember there was just this moment where I was looking at him from head to toe, just, up and down, just studying him. And it was like this little voice in my head was asking me, is this it? Is this really what you want? Is this everything you want right here? Is this it? And I remember thinking, just very, very critically watching him. Like, people say critically, and they mean you're being negative, or you're criticizing someone in a negative way. But I mean just critically, just analyzing him, just studying him, studying every aspect of him, weighing him as heavily as I've ever weighed anyone in my entire life. And just for that moment, it was like, is this what you want? And I was like, yes, this is it. This is really it. Oh my God, I'm going to marry this guy. This is it. And the voice shut up. And that whole searching feeling just evaporated. And I always looked at it as, okay, hypergamy is a computer program running in my head. And it's running and it's running and it's running, mate finder 1.0, let's look for a mate over here. Let's look for a mate over there. And then at some point I successfully found a mate. I looked at him. I evaluated him. I decided this was in fact the mate that I had been seeking. Mate Finder 1.0 program has completed its run. It is now shutting down to reserve that energy for other more important things like, let's have a baby 1.0. And so the drive to go out and seek out a mate had been satisfied. I looked at it and was like, well, that's a program that shut down because it served its purpose. And that was how I saw it. It's like, okay, the hypergamous drive has been satisfied, so now it can shut down. And so maybe when I first heard about this idea, when I first started thinking about it, I was like, well, maybe other women, not all women are like that, other women are going around going, well, could I really do, is this really the best I could do? Maybe they settled for something less than what they really wanted. Maybe they married a guy that they weren't really that into. Maybe they married someone that either A, they thought society wanted them to marry, and so they did what they were supposed to do, or they married a guy who, they would have liked something better, but this was the guy they could get. Maybe that's what's happening. That's what I thought. But I wanted to explore the idea a little bit, and so I started thinking about it a lot. And I've always envisioned my mind as being like a house. You got bright windows that you can look into, plenty of light, and you can walk around and you can see what you're thinking inside the house. Like the different rooms of the house hold different thoughts, ideas, and mental processes. And you walk around in your house and you explore it. And some ideas and some thoughts that you have, you don't necessarily want to share with the world, so shove them in the closet, but they're there, they're there. But every house has a basement, and that would be the subconscious. And so you go into the basement, or at least I do. I don't know how many people actually like rattling around in their basements, but I go into the basement, and you can't really see very well in the basement. It's extremely dark there. There's no windows. No light is shining into the subconscious, and so you have to bring a little flashlight, and you can only see whatever you're pointing the flashlight at. And so you're poking around in the subconscious. And I think a lot of people think of the subconscious this way too. You poke around in the subconscious and you shine the flashlight at whatever you want to see, and you look for the things that you're not aware of. And if you look directly at them, you can make yourself aware of them. And then they might not necessarily be subconscious anymore. You might be able to drag them out of the subconscious up into the upper parts of the mind where they could sit in the windowsill and have the light of day shining on them. But until you've done that, until you've gone into the basement and shown the flashlight directly at them, imagine I'm holding like a little tiny flashlight instead of something else, I guess. Until you've done that, you don't know it's there. And so, there I go into my basement and I'm poking around and shining my flashlight every which way I can. And it's like, okay, if I'm really, really, really unhappy and really, really upset, I think that would wake up the hypergamous function. Like it would restart the computer, maybe restart the program, reboot it. It's like, okay, you're really unhappy. Things have gone really bad. You've been unhappy for a long time. You're still relatively young. Is this relationship a situation that maybe you should leave in favor of something better? Maybe this relationship, despite your best efforts to find and invest your youth and your fertility in a good mate, maybe it's failed. Maybe something went wrong. So maybe he's picked up a drug habit and he's, developed some very dangerous and destructive behaviors, and maybe it's not a good place for you to be raising kids in with this guy. Maybe something's gone wrong. That would wake up the computer, and then, the program would start up again. It's like, okay, is this really the best I can do? I can see that. I can see that totally. But the idea that it's a constantly running program in the very back of our subconscious, I combed all through that basement. I didn't find that thing anywhere. I was like, okay. And I mean, that's where I was at when I made the hypergamy video, where it was like, okay, program shut down, program's completed. It's like, there we are, we did it. Congratulations, we have the guy. We have kids with the guy. This is awesome. I'm really excited. I got to bear his offspring. This is so cool and kind of weirdly formal in its wording, but still very cool. There's a basement underneath the basement. And that's where we get weird stuff, because you can't take your flashlight into the basement underneath the basement. And that's the subconscious that you can't see and you can't make yourself aware of. That's the stuff that you can't carry the flashlight with you. And if you go out down into that basement underneath the basement, well, you're never ever going to be able to pull the things down there out into the light of day. You can't. You cannot make yourself aware of them. You cannot make yourself see them. There is no flashlight. But if you feel around in the dark, you can touch the outlines of different shapes. And the outlines can sometimes give you a clue what it is that's down there in the basement, underneath the basement. Now, again, it's pitch black down there. It's not like you can see anything. So it's not like you can really find all that much. There's stuff that's going on in the human subconscious that all of us as human beings are carrying around that we have no idea is going on. And that's kind of a little bit freaky, but say you go down into the basement, underneath the basement, the depths, the darkest depths of the human subconscious. And you can't see a damn thing. And you can't make yourself aware of a thing. What would that then look like? Let's say that it's in there. And so I thought about that a bit. And I thought about all the times that I've gone to my husband and I've given him a big hug and I told him, I am so proud to be your wife. I'm so happy to be your wife. I'm so happy that I married you. And I meant it. I meant it, every word of it. I'm extremely happy that I married him. My husband is an amazing man. And I feel like I got a ticket to go along on his adventures, and see him through his life doing all the amazing things that he's done. And it's fantastic. It's very, very wonderful. And then to have kids with him as well, so that, I get to have like a little slice of that genetic material in my own offspring. It's like, oh, wonderful, They're going to be healthy. They're going to be strong. They're going to have pieces of this amazing man in them. All of that's wonderful. All of that is hypergamous in its nature. And so I realized little bit by little bit as I thought about it that it's very, very possible. In fact, it's quite probable that the program is still running in the very darkest, deepest depths of the subconscious where I'm never going to be capable of seeing it because I don't have a flashlight down there. But the program's still running. And I know the program's still running because I get progress notes from the program. Every once in a while I'll get a little update that the program has been running and that it's come to the conclusion that I married a good man. And this isn't like on a monthly schedule or anything. It's like every once in a while he'll do something that's very characteristic of him. He'll be doing him. He'll be doing stuff that he does. And he'll do something that's very characteristic of my understanding of him. And, it'll be something kind of cool or something kind of impressive and, maybe something really witty and funny and something endearing. And I'll get that little jump of feedback, that little feeling of warmth and reassurance inside myself. And it's like, God, I married an amazing man. This is awesome, And it's not some sort of self-centered hypergamous thing. It's much more a warmth and a reassurance and a sense of security and comfort. It's like, oh, it's, for lack of a better term, it is love. And that's the thing that I should probably say at this point. If you're digging around in the very darkest places in human subconscious, asking yourself, what causes female love? Is it this hypergamy thing? Do we hunt it down and root it out as the source of all evil? It's like, well, that's going to be a very difficult thing to be angry at because it's extremely subconscious. And at that level of resolution, you do have to ask yourself, why do any human beings experience love? What is love? What does it mean to love? What causes love? Which chemicals are responsible for love? And what causes those chemicals to be released? As a parent, do you love your child? Well, what's causing you to love your child? As a man loving a woman, what causes you to love her? At that level of resolution, those are the questions you're asking. Is hypergamy causing me to love my husband? On some level or another, yes. I mean, there's also the everyday love. I woke up early this morning and made you coffee because I love you. Because you're a part of my life and you're a part of my day-to-day schedule. You're part of all the subroutines in my life. And so the idea of not making you coffee in the morning because I love you just isn't even really there. It's like, well, of course I'm going to do that because you're the person that I wake up next to in the morning and you're there and I love you. It's just, it's there you go. There's that, but there's also that little hypergamous tilt that I'm noticing if I pay very, very close attention to the thoughts that I have and the feelings associated with those thoughts when I have those thoughts. It's like, okay, so the program's still running. And that sounds like a bad thing, but that might be part of the root of human love in and of itself. Because at that point, it's like, well, why do I love him? It's like, well, because he's him. He's an incredible man. He's brilliant and restless and ambitious and hardworking and amazing. And he does all these really cool things. How much of that is hypergamous in its nature? How much of that is me looking up to him and admiring him as a leader, as my leader to, my family unit? It all kind of ties together after a point. So I think that's important to mention. I think that's important to share with people because there are so many men who look at hypergamy and say, oh, hypergamy is terrible, hypergamy is bad. And it's like, well, hypergamy is threaded through, the female emotion of love. That's not to say that the love is somehow not real or not sincere. It means that the elements driving that love are not exactly the same as the elements driving male love. It's not to say that there is no love. So anyway, I thought I'd share that with you guys. I think men and women should be more aware of hypergamy. I think they should be aware of it at a very early age, like, early 20s, maybe very late teens, so 19, 20, 18. As soon as you hit adulthood, you should be aware of this. And I think the reason we should be aware of this is because ultimately an awareness of hypergamy and the nature of hypergamy, I believe, will lead to happier people, happier men, happier women. The problem with any gender war is that no matter who wins the war, everybody loses. And I think that's kind of what we're seeing with feminism, Women get to be in charge, only we're so damn unhappy about it that it doesn't seem to have worked out very well. I think that if women actually take the time to understand their own hypergamous nature and be open and honest with it, they're ultimately going to be able to find what they want more readily and get what they want more easily. I think the tendency of women, the tendency of our society, the tendency of feminism to mask hypergamy or not to completely admit to hypergamy or to not really face up or fess up to hypergamy, it ultimately does all of us a disservice. Because women can't get what they really want. And, it's not good. And we're seeing the results of that more and more. And I think we're going to continue seeing more and more of those results as women who partied away their 20s are suddenly stuck in their 30s going, why can't I find a good man? It's because no one sat down with them and told them, this is what you want. This is what you're going to be driven to seek. And you can, I'm not going to say you can get it 100%, but you're going to have a much better chance of getting it if you know what you're looking for from the outset and you actively seek the thing you're looking for instead of just partying away all that time that you have. There is no way that a woman is going, at least a woman like me, there was no way I was ever going to be satisfied with a he'll have to do kind of guy. There, no way at all. That's why I had my little plan to get a sperm donor when I turned 28, because I just could not believe that I would be able to deal with a long-term relationship with a have to do, he'll have to be good enough kind of guy. And so I wonder sometimes with these gals who are like in their 30s and they're freaking out because they can't find what they want. And the dating market is much less accessible and much less rich with opportunity than it was when they were in their 20s. Everybody keeps telling them they need to lower their standards. Can they do that? Will hypergamy actually let women do that? Or are they constantly going to be seeking out what they really want? Which is, of course, the man who has it all. The man who's got the alpha sexuality, but also the beta fidelity. Who's going to stick around and be a dad to her kids after sharing that wonderful, irresistible alpha seed with her. Is she going to be able to live without that? I didn't think I could. I didn't think I had it in me to settle. I really didn't think it was something I could manage. Maybe if I got old enough and got desperate enough, maybe if I was right now at my age, still not having met a husband, maybe then I would feel differently. But I mean, I'm so happy I never had to face that. And so, one of the most terrifying concepts that I've seen in Tomassi's writing, and I don't think it actually appears in this book, is the idea of the alpha widow. Terrifying concept for me because I can see it happening. I can totally see that having been something that would happen to me, where it's like, he's not what I wanted. He's okay, he's nice, he's a good dad to the kids, he's sweet, but he's not what I wanted. Terrifies me. Terrifies the idea that I could ever possibly have gotten into that situation. Scares the living shit right out of me. I feel immensely grateful that I'm with the man I'm with, because I never had to deal with that. And I was afraid that I was going to have to deal with that. I think, as I said, if people are more aware of how hypergamy works, and I'm not talking about the black pill, MGTOW, all women are hypergamous traitors, bitches kind of way, but if women and men are more aware of the nature of women and the nature of female attraction, women can actually start seeking out the men that they want. They can kind of develop a better long-term plan. I don't think anyone tells women to develop a long-term plan. Everybody's so eager to tell them, oh, get a career. Oh, go explore your possibilities, travel the world, visit a beach, have fun. Life is a party. Nobody tells them that, maybe you want to find somebody because it's time sensitive. You're not going to be young and beautiful forever. Find someone. Find someone good. Find the best that you can. And make off with it like a bandit. You find yourself one good partner, and you latch on to them for all you're worth. Because that's all you need. You really only need one. But you're so much more likely to do that when you're at the peak of your fertility in your 20s, early to mid 20s, not super early 20s, but once you've had a chance to survey the prospects. I think that's an important message that young women need to have, that the party doesn't last forever, and you're best equipped to get what you actually want when you're in the peak of your fertility. And by the way, here's what you want. It's not necessarily going to be the same thing that society is always telling you that you want. It's going to look different from woman to woman, just a little bit. Some women like really, really bulky, muscular guys. Some women like leaner, muscular guys. People have variations in preference, but we all have a general tilt that we're leaning towards. It's really good to be aware of that. Anyway, I'll talk to you guys later.